We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Bonds and Boundaries. Connor Reeves adjusted his tie in the mirror. The sharp lines of his navy suit a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in his mind. At 42, he had built his architectural firm from nothing, transforming abandoned spaces into structures that inspired awe. Yet here, in the home he had designed himself, he felt powerless. "Maggie, we need to talk about this," he called out to his wife of 15 years, Margaret Maggie Reeves, who was rushing around their bedroom, gathering items for another visit to her sister's house. Maggie paused, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. At 38, she carried herself with a quiet determination that had first attracted Connor to her. "There's nothing to discuss. Fiona and Trevor have tried everything. This is their last chance to have a child." Connor sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "I understand what this means to your sister, but surrogacy isn't a simple favor. It's your body undergoing significant risks." "Risk is part of life," Maggie interrupted, her green eyes flashing with that stubborn resolve he both loved and found infuriating. "Fiona would do the same for me." "Would she?" Connor questioned, remembering how Fiona had once disappeared for 3 months when Maggie was diagnosed with appendicitis years ago. Their relationship had always been complicated. Fiona, the older, more demanding sister who somehow always needed Maggie's help, and Maggie, forever trying to earn her sister's approval. The doorbell rang, saving Maggie from responding. "That's Dr. Nichols. She's going to explain the process to both of us." Connor followed his wife downstairs, his mind racing. Dr. Valerie Nichols wasn't just Fiona's fertility specialist. She was also Fiona's best friend. The conflict of interest screamed at him, but Maggie had dismissed his concerns. Dr. Nichols sat in their living room, her clinical smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Connor, I understand you have reservations, but modern gestational surrogacy is safer than ever. Maggie would carry a child created from Fiona and Trevor's genetic material. And what about Maggie's health? She had complications during her last surgery," Connor said, recalling how a routine procedure 2 years ago had led to an infection that took months to overcome. Dr. Nichols waved dismissively. "That was an anomaly. Maggie's health screenings came back excellent." "Screenings you ordered," Connor pointed out. "One of the best clinics in the country," Dr. Nichols countered smoothly. Maggie reached for Connor's hand. "I made up my mind. I'm doing this for Fiona." Later that night, as they lay in bed, Connor tried once more. "Maggie, please. We should get a second opinion. Talk to another specialist who doesn't vacation with your sister." Maggie turned to him, her expression hardening. "Why can't you understand? This is important to me. And your health is important to me," Connor insisted. "What about our plans? The sabbatical next year? Starting our own family?" Something flickered across Maggie's face. Hesitation, perhaps regret, before she steeled herself. "Some things matter more than plans. Fiona needs this." "And what about what we need?" Connor asked quietly. Maggie sat up, her voice rising. "My body, my choice, Connor. You have no say in this decision." The words hung between them, sharp and dividing. Connor felt something shift in their relationship, a fracture forming along a fault line he hadn't known existed. The next morning, Maggie left early to meet Fiona at the clinic. Connor called his old college roommate, Dr. Lawrence Pearson, now a respected reproductive endocrinologist. "I need a favor," Connor said. "Can you review some medical files?" Chapter 2. The Path Chosen. 3 months later, Connor stood in the kitchen, staring at the calendar where Maggie had circled the date of her first embryo transfer. The procedure had been successful. She was now officially carrying Fiona and Trevor's child. "You're still angry," Maggie observed, entering the kitchen in her robe, her face pale from the morning sickness that had started a week earlier. "I'm concerned," Connor corrected, sliding a cup of ginger tea toward her. Despite his reservations, he couldn't stand seeing her suffer. Lawrence called. He reviewed the files. Maggie stiffened. "You went behind my back?" "I sought a second opinion from someone objective," Connor clarified. "He has concerns about the hormone protocol Dr. Nichols prescribed. It's unusually aggressive. Valerie knows what she's doing, Maggie insisted, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Lawrence thinks it increases the risk of complications, especially given your medical history. Maggie's hand trembled slightly as she lifted the tea to her lips. It's too late now. It's not, Connor said gently. Lawrence could adjust the protocol. He's willing to consult. Enough, Maggie snapped, setting down the cup with enough force to slosh tea onto the counter. This is happening, Connor. I made a promise to Fiona. Why can't you support me instead of constantly questioning my decisions? Before Connor could respond, the doorbell rang. Fiona breezed in without waiting for someone to answer, her designer clothes and perfectly styled blonde hair a stark contrast to Maggie's disheveled appearance. There's my hero, Fiona exclaimed, embracing her sister while barely acknowledging Connor. Trevor and I have been researching names all night. We're thinking Alexandra for a girl, after Mom. Connor noticed how Maggie straightened at her sister's praise, color returning to her cheeks. Alexandra is beautiful, she agreed. Fiona turned to Connor, her smile not reaching her eyes. Still brooding, Connor? You should be proud of Maggie's selflessness. I've always been proud of Maggie, Connor replied evenly. I just want what's best for her health. Fiona rolled her eyes. Always the worrier. Maggie's doing fine. Aren't you, sis? Absolutely, Maggie affirmed, though Connor didn't miss the way she pressed a hand against her abdomen. That evening, Connor received a call from Lawrence. I've been reviewing those files more thoroughly, his friend said without preamble. Connor, that clinic has had 3 lawsuits in the past year, all settled quietly. 2 involved surrogate complications. Connor's blood ran cold. What kind of complications? Severe preeclampsia, placental abruption. 1 surrogate needed an emergency hysterectomy. Lawrence hesitated. Connor, I don't want to alarm you, but given Maggie's history of vascular issues during her surgery, she's at higher risk. After hanging up, Connor found Maggie in the nursery they had once planned to use for their own child. She was arranging stuffed animals in a crib that Trevor had delivered earlier. Maggie, he began carefully, I think we should consult with another doctor. I've learned some concerning things about the clinic. Maggie didn't turn around. Fiona says you're just jealous because I'm doing something important for her family instead of focusing on ours. The accusation stung. This isn't about jealousy. It's about your safety. Finally, she faced him, tears in her eyes. I need to do this, Connor. All my life, I've been the disappointing sister, the one who couldn't give our parents grandchildren before they died, the one who chose a career in art restoration that Dad never understood. This is my chance to finally do something remarkable. Connor crossed the room, taking her hands. You've never been disappointing. Your work preserving historical art is extraordinary. Your kindness to everyone you meet is remarkable. You don't need to risk your health to prove your worth. For a moment, vulnerability flickered across Maggie's face. Then her phone buzzed with a text from Fiona, and the wall went back up. I'm tired discussing this. My body, my rules. You have no say. As she walked out, Connor stood alone in what should have been their child's room, surrounded by preparations for a baby that wasn't theirs, feeling a distance growing between him and the woman he loved. Chapter 3. Warning Signs. By the 5th month of the pregnancy, the tension in the Reeves household had become a tangible entity. Connor threw himself into work, taking on an ambitious restoration project for a historical theater downtown. Maggie spent more time with Fiona and Trevor, attending doctor's appointments and shopping for baby items. Connor was reviewing blueprints in his home office when he heard a thud followed by a moan from the bathroom. He rushed in to find Maggie on the floor, clutching her abdomen. Maggie, he knelt beside her, heart pounding. What happened? Just got dizzy, she gasped, her face alarmingly pale. Help me up. We're going to the hospital, Connor stated, already reaching for his phone. No, Maggie grabbed his wrist. Call Valerie first. She said some dizziness is normal. Connor hesitated, then compromised. I'm calling Lawrence. If he says it's normal, we'll stay home. Lawrence instructed them to check Maggie's blood pressure. When a reading came back dangerously high, he told Connor to bring her to the emergency room immediately. At the hospital, Dr. Elena Rodriguez examined Maggie thoroughly. Your blood pressure is concerning, Mrs. Reeves. And there are proteins in your urine, which indicates possible preeclampsia. That can't be right, Maggie protested weakly. Dr. Nichols just checked me 3 days ago. Everything was fine. Dr. Rodriguez frowned. I'd like to see those results. In the meantime, we need to monitor you closely. Connor stepped out to call Fiona, who arrived with Trevor and Dr. Nichols in tow. Dr. Nichols immediately took charge, dismissing Dr. Rodriguez's concerns. These readings are clearly anomalous, she insisted. Maggie was perfectly fine at her appointment. Dr. Rodriguez stood her ground. With all due respect, Dr. Nichols, the tests don't lie. Mrs. Reeves is showing clear signs of early preeclampsia, which could endanger both her and the baby if not managed properly. While the doctors debated, Connor noticed how Fiona and Trevor hovered anxiously, their concern clearly centered on the baby rather than Maggie. It was Trevor who finally asked, "Is the baby at risk?" "Currently, the fetus appears stable," Dr. Rodriguez answered. "But we need to address Mrs. Reeves's condition to keep it that way. Then do whatever's necessary for the baby," Fiona insisted. Connor interjected, "The priority is Maggie's health." Fiona turned on him. "Of course you'd say that. You never wanted this baby to exist." "I never wanted Maggie to risk her life unnecessarily," Connor corrected, his voice low but firm. Dr. Rodriguez ordered bed rest for Maggie and prescribed medication to control her blood pressure. Dr. Nichols reluctantly agreed to the plan, but insisted on remaining Maggie's primary physician. Later, when they were alone in the hospital room, Maggie looked at Connor with tears in her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted for the first time. Connor sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm here, Maggie. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." "Fiona's counting on me," Maggie whispered. "I can't let her down." "You matter too," Connor said gently. "Your health, your life, they're not secondary concerns." Maggie closed her eyes, fatigue evident in every line of her face. "Maybe you were right. Maybe I should have gotten a second opinion." It was the closest she'd come to admitting she'd made a mistake, and Connor felt no satisfaction in it, only concern for what lay ahead. The next morning, Lawrence visited them, having been called in as a consulting physician. His expression was grave as he reviewed Maggie's chart. The hormone protocol was too aggressive, he confirmed quietly to Connor in the hallway. It likely contributed to the preeclampsia. And there's something else, the embryo. They transferred two, not one as originally planned. Connor felt a cold wave of anger. "They never told us." "It increases the risks," Lawrence explained, "especially with Maggie's vascular issues." When Connor confronted Dr. Nichols, she dismissed his concerns. Multiple embryo transfers improve success rates. Fiona and Trevor wanted to maximize their chances. At the expense of Maggie's health? Connor challenged. Dr. Nichols's expression hardened. Maggie understood the process. She signed the consent forms. Did she know about the increased risks with her specific condition? Dr. Nichols's silence was answer enough. As Connor returned to Maggie's room, he found Fiona sitting by the bed, holding her sister's hand. "We've been talking," Fiona said, her tone suspiciously conciliatory. "Maggie can come stay with us until the baby is born. We have the guest suite on the first floor, so she won't have to navigate stairs. And I can monitor her condition day and night." Before Connor could object, Maggie spoke up. "I think it's for the best, Connor. Fiona and Trevor live closer to the hospital anyway." Connor saw the manipulation at work. Fiona separating Maggie from his influence, surrounding her with people who prioritized the baby over her well-being. But he also saw the desperation in Maggie's eyes, her need to fulfill the promise she'd made. "If that's what you want," he conceded, knowing he was losing ground in the battle to protect his wife. As he drove home alone that night, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. On their bedside table, he found the anniversary card he'd planned to give Maggie the following week. Inside, he had written about their future plans, traveling to Italy to see the art she loved, finally starting their own family, growing old together in the home they'd built. Now, he wondered if any of those dreams would come true, or if Maggie's decision had set them on an irreversible path toward loss. Chapter 4. Fractured Foundations. 2 weeks after Maggie moved into Fiona and Trevor's home, Connor found himself sitting alone in Dr. Lawrence Pearson's office, clutching a folder of Maggie's medical records that he'd obtained through his medical power of attorney, a document Maggie had signed years ago and forgotten about. "It's worse than I thought," Lawrence said gravely, pointing to the latest test results. "Her kidney function is declining, and her blood pressure isn't responding adequately to medication. The preeclampsia is progressing despite the bed rest." Connor rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of weeks without proper sleep. "What are our options?" "Medically speaking, the safest course would be to deliver now. At 26 weeks, the baby would be premature but has a fighting chance with modern NICU care. And Maggie, it would significantly reduce her risks. The longer the pregnancy continues, the greater the danger to her organs, particularly her kidneys and liver." Connor nodded, absorbing the information. Dr. Nichols is pushing to continue the pregnancy as long as possible. She says every day matters for the baby's development. Lawrence's expression hardened. Every day also increases Maggie's risk of seizures, stroke, or organ failure. "Connor, I've reviewed Dr. Nichols's notes. She's consistently downplayed the severity of Maggie's condition in her records. Why would she do that? I can only speculate, but given her close relationship with Fiona and Trevor." Lawrence trailed off, the implication clear. Connor stood, decision made. "I'm bringing Maggie home today. She needs objective medical care." At Fiona and Trevor's expansive suburban house, Connor found Maggie propped up in bed, looking alarmingly thin despite her pregnant belly. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her face was puffy from fluid retention. "Connor," she greeted him weakly. "You didn't have to come. Fiona's taking good care of me." "I've been talking to Lawrence," Connor said, sitting beside her. "Maggie, your condition is serious. More serious than Dr. Nichols has let on." Maggie's hand fluttered protectively over her stomach. "The babies are doing fine." Connor paused, processing her words. "Babies? Plural?" Confusion crossed Maggie's face. "Yes, the twins. Didn't Fiona tell you? We found out at the last ultrasound." Another piece of information deliberately withheld from him. "Maggie, I want you to come home. Lawrence has arranged for you to see specialists at University Hospital. I can't leave now. Fiona needs me close by." "Fiona needs you alive," Connor said bluntly. "The longer this pregnancy continues in your condition, the greater the risk to your life." Maggie stared at him, shock evident in her pale face. "Dr. Nichols said I'm stable. She's not being honest with you." Connor handed her the folder with her medical records and Lawrence's assessment. "See for yourself." As Maggie read through the documents, her hands began to tremble. "This can't be right. My kidney function is..." Her voice trailed off as she continued reading. The bedroom door opened, and Fiona entered carrying a tray of food. Her smile faltered when she saw Connor. "You didn't mention you were coming." "I didn't realize I needed permission to see my wife," Connor replied evenly. Fiona noticed the medical records spread across the bed. "What's all this?" "The truth," Connor stated. "Maggie's condition is critical. The pregnancy needs to be delivered soon for her safety." Fiona set down the tray with enough force to slosh soup onto the pristine white linens. "Absolutely not. The babies need more time. Valerie says we can get to at least 32 weeks. "At what cost?" Connor challenged. "Maggie's organs are failing." "Don't be dramatic. It's all here in black and white." "Fiona," Connor interrupted, gesturing to the reports. "Or are you going to tell Maggie that her life is an acceptable sacrifice?" Fiona's face contorted with anger and fear. "You never wanted this. You've been trying to sabotage everything from the beginning." "Stop it," Maggie said quietly, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Connor, are these reports accurate?" "Lawrence verified them personally." Maggie looked at her sister, something shifting in her expression. "Fiona, did you know how serious my condition was?" Fiona hesitated just a moment too long. "Valerie says there are always risks in pregnancy, but did you know?" Maggie pressed. "We need these babies, Maggie," Fiona finally said, her voice breaking. "You promised us a family." In that moment, Connor saw Maggie's illusions about her sister shatter. The realization that her life was being balanced against Fiona's desires played across her face in a wave of hurt and betrayal. "I'm going home with Connor," Maggie decided, her voice quiet but firm. "You can't," Fiona protested. "The contract doesn't require her to risk her life," Connor finished. "I've had our lawyer review it thoroughly." Trevor appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Everything okay up here?" "Maggie's coming home with me today," Connor informed him. "Her medical condition requires immediate specialized care." Trevor looked uncertainly between his wife and Maggie. "Valerie assured us everything was under control." "Read the reports yourself," Connor suggested, gathering Maggie's essential belongings. As he helped Maggie to her feet, her legs buckled. Connor caught her, alarmed by how light she felt despite the pregnancy. "This is a mistake," Fiona insisted, growing desperate. "Maggie, please. We've come so far." Maggie turned to her sister, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to help you, Fiona. I've always wanted your approval, but I can't die for it." The words hung in the air between them, stark and irrefutable. "If you leave now," Fiona said coldly, "don't expect me to ever forgive you." Connor felt Maggie stiffen beside him, then somehow stand taller. "That's the difference between us, Fiona. I would never ask you to die for me." As Connor helped Maggie to the car, he noticed Dr. Nichols pulling into the driveway. She emerged from her vehicle, face stormy. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded. "Maggie needs constant monitoring, which is why we're transferring her to University Hospital," Connor replied, continuing toward his car. Dr. Nichols stepped in front of them. "I strongly advise against changing medical providers at this critical stage. Your advice hasn't served Maggie well so far," Connor pointed out. "Step aside, Dr. Nichols. You're making a serious mistake," she warned. "The surrogacy contract specifies." "No contract supersedes my wife's right to life," Connor interrupted. "Lawrence Pearson is waiting for us at the hospital. I suggest you prepare your records for transfer and for review by the medical board." The threat landed visibly. Dr. Nichols paled. "You're overreacting. Maggie's condition is critical." Maggie finished for her, her voice weak but determined. "And you knew it all along." As they drove away, Connor watched Fiona, Trevor, and Dr. Nichols huddled in heated discussion in the rearview mirror. Beside him, Maggie wept silently. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how much helping Fiona meant to you." Maggie wiped her tears with shaking hands. "All my life, I thought if I just did enough, gave enough, she would finally see me as her equal. But I was never her sister, just a resource to be used." Connor reached across to take her hand. "What matters now is getting you the care you need." Maggie squeezed his hand weakly. "I should have listened to you from the beginning. You tried to warn me." "This isn't about being right," Connor assured her. "It's about keeping you safe now." As they approached the hospital, Maggie suddenly gasped, doubling over in pain. "Connor, something's wrong." Connor's heart hammered as he sped toward the emergency entrance, his wife's cries of pain filling the car, and his mind filled with fear of what lay ahead. Chapter 5, Crisis Point. The hospital corridor was a blur of activity as medical personnel rushed Maggie into the examination room. Connor found himself pushed aside, watching helplessly as doctors and nurses swarmed around his wife. "BP 190 over 110, a nurse called out. Heart rate elevated at 120. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, whom they had met during Maggie's previous hospitalization, took charge immediately. "She's seizing. 4 milligrams of magnesium sulfate, now." Connor pressed himself against the wall, terror gripping his chest as Maggie's body convulsed on the gurney. Lawrence appeared beside him, grim-faced. "Eclampsia," he explained quietly. "The condition progressed to seizures. They need to deliver immediately." "Will she?" Connor couldn't finish the question. Lawrence gripped his shoulder. "Elena is the best. If anyone can pull Maggie through this, she can." Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Connor found himself in a waiting room, signing consent forms with a shaking hand while Lawrence explained the emergency C-section procedure. "The twins will be taken directly to the NICU," Lawrence told him. "They're only 26 weeks, so they'll need significant support. And Maggie, Connor pressed. Lawrence's expression was carefully neutral. They'll do everything possible to stabilize her. The delivery will relieve the immediate cause of the eclampsia, but her organs have been under strain. The surgery lasted 2 hours, though to Connor it felt like days. When Dr. Rodriguez finally emerged, her surgical cap still on and exhaustion evident in her eyes, Connor braced himself. "Mr. Reeves," she began, "we've delivered twin girls. They're very premature, but stable for now, given the circumstances. They've been transferred to the NICU. And my wife." Dr. Rodriguez hesitated. Mrs. Reeves suffered significant complications. The eclampsia caused her blood pressure to spike dangerously high, resulting in placental abruption. The placenta separated prematurely from the uterine wall, causing severe hemorrhaging. Connor felt the room tilt slightly. "Is she?" "She's alive," Dr. Rodriguez assured him quickly, "but in critical condition. We had to perform an emergency hysterectomy to stop the bleeding. She's currently in the ICU on a ventilator to support her breathing while her body recovers from the trauma." The words hit Connor like physical blows. Hysterectomy, ventilator, critical condition. "When can I see her?" "They're settling her in the ICU now. You can visit briefly once she's stabilized, though she won't be conscious yet." As Dr. Rodriguez led him toward the intensive care unit, Connor's phone vibrated repeatedly in his pocket. Glancing at it, he saw multiple missed calls and messages from Fiona and Trevor. He silenced the device without reading them. Maggie lay surrounded by machines, tubes and wires connecting her to monitors that beeped and hummed, tracking her fragile hold on life. Her face, normally vibrant with expression, was ashen and still beneath the ventilator tube. Connor sank into the chair beside her bed, taking her limp hand carefully between his own. "I'm here, Maggie," he whispered. "You're not alone." A nurse approached gently. "Mr. Reeves? There are people in the waiting room asking about your wife and the babies. They say they're family." Connor knew without asking who waited outside. "Please tell them that neither Maggie nor the infants are receiving visitors at this time." "They're quite insistent," the nurse said apologetically. "Then insist right back," Connor replied, his voice hardening. "My wife is fighting for her life because of them. They have no right to be here." The nurse nodded understanding and left to deliver the message. Minutes later, Connor's phone lit up with a text from Trevor. "We need to see our daughters." "This isn't right." Connor typed back a single message. "Not now. Not today. Not my choice. Not my emergency." He then blocked both their numbers, focusing all his attention on the woman before him. Hours passed in the sterile quiet of the ICU, broken only by the rhythmic sounds of the machines keeping Maggie alive. Around midnight, Lawrence appeared with coffee and a sandwich. "You need to eat," he insisted gently. "Maggie will need your strength in the days ahead." Connor accepted the offering mechanically. "The doctors say there was extensive damage. Her kidneys, her heart. One step at a time," Lawrence advised. "Elena is consulting with specialists. Maggie's young and was healthy before this. That works in her favor. She wanted to help her sister so badly," Connor said, his voice breaking, "to finally earn approval that should have been freely given." Lawrence sat beside him. "I reviewed Dr. Nichols's complete records." "Connor, she knew about Maggie's elevated risks from the beginning. The protocol she used wasn't just aggressive. It was reckless given Maggie's medical history." Anger flared through Connor's exhaustion. "She'll answer for this." "Focus on Maggie first," Lawrence cautioned. "Legal reckonings can wait." Connor nodded, though the seed of righteous fury had taken root. As dawn broke, bringing no change in Maggie's condition, a hospital administrator appeared. "Mr. Reeves? There's a matter requiring your attention. The Baileys, Fiona and Trevor, have engaged legal counsel regarding visitation rights to the infants in the NICU." Connor stood, stretching his stiff muscles. "The surrogacy contract states that parental rights transfer upon birth. They're welcome to visit their daughters." The administrator looked uncomfortable. "There's more. They're asserting that Mrs. Reeves's decision to leave their home against medical advice contributed to her condition and the premature birth." The audacity stole Connor's breath. They're blaming Maggie for complications their chosen doctor concealed and exacerbated? I'm just conveying the message, the administrator said apologetically. Their lawyer has requested a meeting. Tell them my lawyer will contact theirs, Connor replied, ice forming around his heart. And inform them that University Hospital security has been instructed not to allow either of them anywhere near my wife's room. After the administrator left, Connor called Diana Walsh, a formidable attorney who had helped with contracts for his architectural firm. I need your help, he said without preamble when she answered. My wife is in the ICU after serving as a surrogate. The intended parents are trying to deflect blame and possibly building a case against her. Diana's response was immediate and reassuring. I'll be there in an hour. Don't speak to anyone about this until I arrive. True to her word, Diana arrived precisely 60 minutes later, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. She listened intently as Connor explained the situation, taking detailed notes. First things first, she said when he finished. We need to secure all of Maggie's medical records, not just from his hospital, but from Dr. Nichols and any facilities where she received treatment during the surrogacy. I'll file emergency motions this morning. What about Fiona and Trevor's claims? Diana's smile was cold and professional. Let them try. From what you've told me, they encouraged your wife to continue a high-risk pregnancy against sound medical advice, facilitated by a doctor with clear conflicts of interest. If anyone should be concerned about legal consequences, it's them. For the first time in days, Connor felt a glimmer of hope that justice might be possible. As Diana left to begin work on his behalf, he returned to Maggie's bedside, determined that when she woke, not if, but when, he would ensure she had nothing to fear. Chapter 6, Battle Lines. On the 7th day of Maggie's hospitalization, Connor entered her ICU room to find her eyes open, following the movements of a nurse adjusting her for. The ventilator had been removed the previous day when she began breathing on her own, though oxygen still flowed through a nasal cannula. Maggie, he whispered, hope surging through him as he rushed to her side. She turned toward his voice, recognition dawning slowly in her eyes. She tried to speak, but only a rasp emerged from her dry throat. Don't try to talk yet, he urged, taking her hand. Just rest. You're going to be okay. Tears welled in her eyes as awareness seemed to return. Her free hand moved weakly to her now flat abdomen, a question in her gaze. The babies were delivered, Connor confirmed gently. Twin girls. They're small but fighting hard in the NICU. Relief flickered across her face, followed quickly by distress. She gestured weakly, trying to communicate. Fiona and Trevor are with them, Connor assured her, interpreting her concern. The girls are receiving excellent care. Maggie relaxed slightly, though Connor noted she didn't ask to see the babies herself. Perhaps she understood instinctively that her role in their lives was already complete, or perhaps she sensed the tensions that had developed during her unconsciousness. Dr. Rodriguez arrived for her rounds, pleased to find Maggie awake. This is excellent progress, Mrs. Reeves. You've been through a significant trauma, but your body is showing remarkable resilience. As the doctor examined her, Maggie managed to form a hoarse question. How bad? Dr. Rodriguez glanced at Connor before answering honestly. The eclampsia and subsequent hemorrhaging caused substantial stress to your organs. We had to perform an emergency hysterectomy to save your life. Your kidneys sustained damage, though we're hopeful they'll recover function over time. You may need dialysis temporarily. Maggie closed her eyes, absorbing the devastating news. When she opened them again, determination had replaced despair. She pointed weakly at Connor, then made a writing motion. Connor quickly found a notepad and pen. Maggie's handwriting was shaky but legible. Not your fault. Mine. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, Connor insisted, his throat tight with emotion. Maggie shook her head, writing again. Should have listened. Fiona, she and Trevor are focused on the babies, Connor replied carefully, unwilling to burden Maggie with the legal maneuvers that had occurred while she was unconscious. Maggie studied his face, clearly sensing there was more to the story. She wrote, "Tell me everything." Connor sighed, knowing Maggie deserved the truth. There have been some complications beyond the medical ones. Fiona and Trevor initially tried to suggest that your decision to leave their house against medical advice contributed to the emergency. Maggie's expression hardened, her grip tightening on the pen as she wrote. They knew the risks? Yes, Connor confirmed. Dr. Nichols downplayed your condition to keep the pregnancy going as long as possible, despite the danger to your life. Anger flashed in Maggie's eyes, an emotion Connor had rarely seen in his typically compassionate wife. She wrote shakily, "Lawyer?" "Diana Walsh is handling everything," Connor assured her. "She's already filed complaints against Dr. Nichols with the medical board and is preparing potential legal action." Maggie nodded, seemingly satisfied, then wrote one more note before exhaustion overtook her. "No contact with Fiona. Not ready. I understand," Connor said, relieved that Maggie wasn't rushing to forgive her sister's betrayal. "Rest now. I'll be here when you wake up." Over the next few days, Maggie's condition improved gradually. She progressed from writing notes to whispering, then to speaking normally, though fatigue remained her constant companion. Her kidney function remained compromised, requiring dialysis 3 times a week. The doctors explained that while she might eventually recover enough function to discontinue dialysis, she would likely face kidney issues for the rest of her life. 10 days after the emergency delivery, Diana Walsh arrived at the hospital with news. Connor stepped out of Maggie's room to speak with her privately in the family consultation area. "The medical board has opened a formal investigation into Dr. Nichols," Diana reported. Lawrence's testimony was compelling, as were the discrepancies between her records and the actual test results. "What about Fiona and Trevor?" Diana's expression was grim. "They've escalated their position. They're now claiming that Maggie violated the surrogacy agreement by changing doctors without their consent, potentially endangering their children." Connor clenched his fists. "Those endangered children would be orphans if Lawrence and I hadn't intervened when we did." "I know," Diana agreed, placing a calming hand on his arm. "Their position is morally reprehensible and legally dubious. However, there's something else you should know. Fiona has been speaking to the press." She handed Connor her tablet, displaying an article from the local newspaper. The headline read, "Surrogate's Sister Abandons Agreement, Leaving Devastated Couple Fighting for Premature Twins." The article painted Fiona and Trevor as victims of Maggie's reckless decision to change medical providers at a critical stage of the pregnancy. Dr. Nichols was quoted extensively, claiming that Maggie had been stable under her care and that the emergency resulted from the stress of being moved against medical advice. Connor read the piece with growing horror and rage. "This is slander. Pure fiction." "It is," Diana agreed, "and we'll address it legally. But you should be prepared. Stories like this generate public sympathy. The Baileys are controlling the narrative right now. What can we do?" "Fight back with facts," Diana said firmly. "I've arranged for a medical ethicist to review the case." Additionally, 3 former surrogates who experienced complications under Dr. Nichols' care have come forward after seeing the article. They're willing to testify about similar patterns of neglect and risk minimization. Connor nodded, determination replacing his initial shock. "Maggie deserves vindication, not vilification." "There's one more thing," Diana added hesitantly. "The Baileys have requested that Maggie visit the NICU to see the twins. They're suggesting her avoidance of the babies demonstrates a lack of maternal instinct or attachment that contributed to her medical choices. The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it weren't so cruel. Maggie is still recovering from nearly dying to give them children. She can barely walk to the bathroom unassisted." "I've made that clear to their attorney," Diana assured him. "But you should know they're building a narrative piece by piece." Connor returned to Maggie's room, unsure how much to share. She looked up from the book she was reading, immediately sensing his distress. "What is it?" she asked, her voice still raspy from the ventilator tube. After a moment's hesitation, Connor decided that protecting Maggie from the truth would only infantilize her. He explained Diana's update, including the newspaper article. Maggie listened in silence, her expression growing stonier with each revelation. When he finished, she asked to see the article herself. "Are you sure?" Connor questioned. It's pretty hurtful. I need to know what I'm facing, Maggie insisted. Connor handed her the tablet reluctantly. As she read, tears filled her eyes, but they seemed born of anger rather than hurt. Abandon the agreement, she quoted bitterly. Unstable and emotional. They make it sound like I was having mood swings instead of organ failure. Diana says we can sue for defamation. Maggie handed the tablet back. Do it. And Connor? I want to see the babies. Connor blinked in surprise. You don't have to do that just because they're trying to manipulate you. I'm not doing it for them, Maggie clarified. I'm doing it for myself. I carried those girls. I nearly died bringing them into the world. I want to see them before. She trailed off, swallowing hard. Before what? Connor prompted gently. Before I say goodbye to them. Before I put this chapter behind us and focus on healing, both my body and our marriage. Connor felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Despite everything, Maggie was looking forward, not back. I'll arrange it, he promised. On our terms, not theirs. The following day, Dr. Rodriguez approved a brief visit to the NICU. A nurse brought a wheelchair, and Connor pushed Maggie through the hospital corridors, an orderly following with her portable dialysis equipment. In the NICU anteroom, they washed thoroughly and donned sterile gowns. The NICU director, Dr. Martha Winters, greeted them warmly. The twins are doing remarkably well considering their gestational age, she informed them. They're breathing with minimal assistance and taking small amounts of milk through feeding tubes. Are the Baileys here? Connor asked, scanning the room. They left about an hour ago, Dr. Winters assured him. I made sure to schedule your visit when they wouldn't be present, as requested. She led them to 2 incubators positioned side by side. Inside each was a tiny form, smaller than Connor had imagined possible, connected to monitors and tubes, yet somehow determined and vital. Maggie reached out a trembling hand to place against the clear plastic. They're so small, she whispered. Baby A weighs 800 grams, and Baby B is 780, Dr. Winters explained. Both are showing good progress. Do they have names? Maggie asked. Alexander and Victoria, the doctor confirmed. The Baileys completed the birth certificates yesterday. Connor watched as Maggie studied the twins, her expression a complex mixture of wonder, sadness, and resolution. They'll be okay, she asked the doctor. They have the typical challenges of extreme prematurity, but barring unexpected complications, their prognosis is good. They're fighters. Maggie nodded, a single tear tracking down her cheek. Good. She looked up at Connor. I'm ready to go now. As they left the NICU, Connor noticed a hospital volunteer with a camera phone hastily look away and hurry down the corridor. A suspicion formed in his mind. Wait here, he told Maggie, then strode after the volunteer, catching up near the elevators. Excuse me, did you just take pictures in the NICU? The young woman looked flustered. I'm not supposed to be on duty now. I was just visiting a friend. So why were you wearing a volunteer badge? Connor challenged. And why were you photographing my wife? She flushed guiltily. Who put you up to this? Connor demanded, though he already knew the answer. The woman's silence confirmed his suspicions. Connor held out his hand. The phone. Now. I can't give you my phone. Then delete the photos in front of me, Connor insisted, or I'll report you to hospital security for privacy violations. Reluctantly, she opened her phone and deleted several images while Connor watched. As she hurried away, he returned to Maggie, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. What was that about? Maggie asked. Fiona's still playing games, Connor explained grimly. But we're not playing anymore. Back in Maggie's room, Connor called Diana to update her on the incident. We need to go on the offensive, he concluded. No more reactive defense. I agree, Diana said. It's time to file formal charges against Dr. Nichols for medical malpractice and against the Baileys for coercion and emotional distress. And Connor? I think it's time we talk to the press ourselves. Connor looked at Maggie, who nodded her agreement. The battle lines were drawn, and they were ready to fight, not just for justice, but for the truth. Chapter 7. The Court of Public Opinion. 2 weeks after Maggie's NICU visit, she was finally discharged from the hospital. though her recovery was far from complete. Connor had transformed their home's guest room into a temporary bedroom on the first floor, equipped with medical monitoring devices and a specialized bed that made it easier for Maggie to get up despite her lingering weakness. On their first morning home, Connor brought breakfast on a tray, finding Maggie already awake and reviewing documents Diana had sent over. "You should be resting," he admonished gently, setting down the tray. Maggie looked up, determination in her eyes despite the fatigue evident in her face. "I've rested enough. It's time to fight back." The documents contained Diana's strategy for their media response to Fiona and Trevor's campaign of misinformation. The lawyer had arranged an exclusive interview with Catherine Maxwell, a respected journalist known for her thoughtful coverage of medical ethics issues. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Connor asked, sitting beside Maggie on the bed. "We could wait until you're stronger." Maggie shook her head. "Every day we wait is another day they control the narrative. Besides, I want people to see exactly what their minor complications did to me." She gestured to her frail body, the dialysis port visible beneath her thin robe, the medication array on the bedside table. Connor couldn't argue with her logic. Fiona and Trevor had been portraying themselves as victims in the press while Maggie fought for her life. Now that she had survived, her very existence contradicted their sanitized version of events. Catherine Maxwell arrived that afternoon, her professional demeanor softening when she saw Maggie's condition. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Mrs. Reeves. I understand this must be difficult." "Less difficult than nearly dying," Maggie replied with unexpected steel in her voice. The interview lasted 3 hours. Maggie spoke candidly about her initial motivation to help her sister, the gradual realization that her health concerns were being dismissed, and the devastating physical consequences she now faced. Connor shared his perspective as well, including the medical reports that demonstrated Dr. Nichols' negligence. "May I ask about your current relationship with your sister?" Catherine inquired gently. Maggie's expression tightened. "There is no relationship. Fiona chose her desire for children over my life. When I needed her most, when I was fighting to survive, she was giving interviews portraying me as selfish and unstable. That must be painful after what you sacrificed for her." "The most painful part," Maggie said quietly, "is realizing that the loving sister I thought I knew never existed. I spent my life trying to earn approval from someone incapable of genuine love." When Catherine asked about the twins, Maggie's response was measured. "I hope they thrive. I hope they grow up loved and cherished. And I hope they never learn that their parents were willing to sacrifice their birth mother's life to bring them into the world." After the journalist left, promising the article would run within days, Maggie collapsed against her pillows, exhausted but satisfied. "That felt good," she admitted, "to finally tell my side." Connor kissed her forehead. "You were magnificent. Rest now." Catherine's article appeared 3 days later, running not just in a local paper, but in a national publication known for its investigative journalism. The headline read, "The True Cost of Surrogacy, When Family Ties Become Life-Threatening." The piece was devastating in its factual precision. Catherine had acquired independent medical experts to review Maggie's records, all of whom confirmed that the surrogacy had been mismanaged from the beginning. She had also spoken to the 3 former surrogates Diana had found, each sharing similar stories of Dr. Nichols dismissing their health concerns in favor of carrying pregnancies to term. Most damning was Catherine's revelation that Dr. Nichols had financial incentives beyond her medical fees. She was an investor in the fertility clinic that created the embryos and stood to gain significantly from its reputation for successful surrogacies. The article included a single photo of Maggie, taken with her permission during the interview. She sat in her wheelchair, medical equipment visible, looking directly at the camera with quiet dignity. The image powerfully conveyed what words could not: the physical toll of her ordeal. The public reaction was swift and largely sympathetic to Maggie. Social media exploded with supportive messages, many from women who had experienced their own pregnancy complications or family betrayals. Medical ethics experts appeared on news programs discussing the case, most condemning Dr. Nichols' apparent conflict of interest. Fiona and Trevor remained silent for 24 hours, then issued a brief statement expressing disappointment that a private family matter has been sensationalized and asking for privacy during this difficult time for our premature daughters. Their attempt to regain control of the narrative fell flat. Catherine Maxwell had been thorough, and the evidence she presented was irrefutable. Dr. Nichols faced not only the medical board investigation, but also public condemnation. Her practice issued a statement placing her on administrative leave pending review, effectively distancing themselves from the controversy. As the media storm intensified, Connor and Maggie received an unexpected visitor. Trevor Bailey arrived at their home alone, looking haggard and uncomfortable on their doorstep. Connor answered the door, immediately blocking the entrance. "What do you want, Trevor?" "5 minutes," Trevor pleaded. "Just 5 minutes to talk." Connor was inclined to refuse, but Maggie called from the living room. "Let him in, Connor. I want to hear what he has to say." Trevor followed Connor into the living room, where Maggie sat in her wheelchair near the window. Her appearance, still gaunt and pale despite being home for a week, seemed to shock him. "Maggie, Trevor faltered, clearly unprepared for the physical evidence of her ordeal. "I didn't know it was this bad." "Didn't know, or didn't want to know?" Maggie asked quietly. Trevor sank onto the edge of the sofa, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Things have gotten out of hand. The article, the public reaction, Fiona's falling apart. The hospital's been flooded with negative calls. People are saying we try to kill you." "What did you expect?" Connor asked coldly. "You and Fiona tried to deflect blame when Maggie was fighting for her life. You painted her as unstable and reckless when she was the victim." "We were desperate," Trevor admitted. "The twins were early. We were scared they might not survive, and then the doctors are saying Maggie might not make it either. We panicked." "Panic is a momentary lapse," Connor pointed out. "You orchestrated a sustained campaign to discredit my wife while she was unconscious in the ICU." Trevor had no response to this truth. Instead, he turned to Maggie. "The twins are improving. They've gained weight. The doctors think they'll come home in about a month." "I'm glad," Maggie said sincerely. "Whatever has happened between us, I never wish them harm." "Would you?" Trevor hesitated. "Would you consider issuing a joint statement with us? Something conciliatory that could calm things down? For the girl's sake?" Connor laughed incredulously. "You're not here out of concern for Maggie. You're here because public opinion has turned against you, and it's affecting your professional reputation." Trevor flushed, confirming Connor's assessment. "Is it so wrong to want to protect our daughters from a public scandal? Those daughters exist because Maggie was willing to risk everything," Connor reminded him. "And in return, you and Fiona were willing to risk her life." Maggie raised a hand, silencing both men. "Trevor, I won't be issuing any statements with you or Fiona. The truth is out there now, and I won't help you sanitize it." Her voice was calm but resolute. "I do have one question, though. Did you know? Did you understand how serious my condition was when you and Fiona insisted I stay under Dr. Nichols' care?" Trevor's eyes slid away from hers. "Valerie said there were risks, but that they were being managed. She said moving you would be more dangerous than continuing. And you believed her because it was what you wanted to hear," Maggie concluded. "Just as Fiona did. We wanted our children," Trevor said defensively. "At any cost," Maggie added softly. "Including my life." Trevor stood, recognizing the futility of his mission. "What happens now? Will you continue with the lawsuits?" "Yes," Connor answered firmly. "Dr. Nichols' malpractice nearly killed Maggie. She'll face consequences for that, as will the clinic that employed her despite known concerns about her practices." "And us?" Trevor asked, his voice barely audible. Maggie answered this time. "That depends on what happens next. If you and Fiona continue trying to portray yourselves as victims, we'll have no choice but to fight back with every legal means available. If you acknowledge the truth and accept responsibility, perhaps we can find a less adversarial path forward." Trevor nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I'll talk to Fiona. For what it's worth, Maggie, I am sorry. Not just about how things have played out publicly, but about what happened to you." As Connor showed him out, Trevor turned at the door. The twins ask about you sometimes. Connor stared at him in disbelief. They're premature newborns. They don't ask about anything. Trevor had the grace to look ashamed. I meant Fiona, and I wonder if you'll ever want to be part of their lives. They're your nieces, after all. That's not a decision we need to make today, Connor replied. Right now, our priority is Maggie's recovery, physical, emotional, and otherwise. After Trevor left, Connor returned to find Maggie staring out the window, a pensive expression on her face. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "I think I will be," she replied thoughtfully. Seeing Trevor like that, desperate, humbled, I realized something important. "What's that?" Maggie turned to him, a new clarity in her eyes. "I'm not angry anymore. Not really. I'm just done. Done trying to earn Fiona's love. Done sacrificing my well-being for her approval. Done with that chapter of my life." Connor felt a surge of pride and relief. The road ahead was still challenging. Maggie faced months of dialysis, possible kidney transplantation, and the lasting effects of her traumatic experience. But in that moment, he glimpsed the resilience that had first drawn him to her, the quiet strength that would carry them through whatever came next. Chapter 8. Justice and Healing. Autumn arrived, painting the trees outside Maggie's windows in brilliant hues of red and gold. 3 months had passed since her hospital discharge, and while her physical recovery progressed slowly, her spirit had strengthened remarkably. Connor entered the sunroom where Maggie sat working at her laptop, a project spread across the table beside her. She looked up with a smile that warmed him more than the morning sun streaming through the windows. "The Restoration Committee approved my proposal," she announced happily. "They want me to consult on the Westfield Museum renovations once I'm well enough to visit the site." Connor leaned down to kiss her, thrilled to see her reconnecting with her passion for art restoration. "That's wonderful. Lawrence said your latest labs show improvement, so perhaps you'll be ready sooner than we thought." Maggie's kidney function had gradually increased, though she still required dialysis twice weekly. Her physicians were cautiously optimistic that she might eventually need the treatments only occasionally, rather than facing immediate transplantation. "Diana called while you were out," Maggie said, her expression growing more serious. "The medical board has completed its investigation of Dr. Nichols." Connor sat beside her, "And her license has been suspended for 2 years. She can apply for reinstatement after that, but only under supervision and with significant practice restrictions." Although it didn't seem punishment enough for the woman who had nearly cost Maggie her life, Connor recognized it as a significant professional setback. "What about the malpractice suit?" "The insurance company has offered a settlement. Diana thinks it's reasonable, enough to cover all of my medical expenses, lost income, and compensatory damages." Maggie hesitated. She also heard from Fiona and Trevor's lawyer. Connor tensed. After Trevor's visit, the Baileys had maintained public silence, neither continuing their defamation campaign nor acknowledging their role in Maggie's suffering. The twins had been discharged from the hospital 6 weeks earlier, and Maggie had received only a brief text notification from Fiona. "Alexandra and Victoria came home today. They're doing well. What do they want now?" Connor asked warily. "They're proposing mediation instead of continuing with the lawsuits. A neutral third party to help us reach an agreement about the future." Connor studied Maggie's face, trying to gauge her feelings. "What do you want to do?" Maggie sighed, closing her laptop. "Part of me wants to pursue the lawsuit to its fullest, to make them acknowledge publicly what they did. But another part of me is just tired, Connor. Tired of the conflict, tired of having this hanging over us while I'm trying to heal." Connor took her hand. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." "I think I want to try mediation," Maggie said after a moment. "Not because they deserve mercy, but because I deserve peace." The mediation session was scheduled for the following week at Diana's office. Connor and Maggie arrived early, settling into the conference room with their attorney. Maggie still used a cane to walk longer distances, a visible reminder of her ongoing recovery. When Fiona and Trevor entered with their lawyer, Fiona stopped short at the sight of her sister. Like Trevor during his visit, she seemed unprepared for the physical evidence of Maggie's ordeal. The sisters had not seen each other since before the emergency delivery. "Maggie," Fiona said softly, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in her voice. She looked thinner than Connor remembered, with dark circles shadowing her eyes, the marks of new parenthood. Maggie nodded in acknowledgement, but offered no warm greeting. The mediator, a former judge named Helen Burns, called the session to order, establishing ground rules for the discussion. "We're here to find a resolution that acknowledges the harm done while creating a sustainable path forward," she explained. "This is not about winning or losing, but about healing where possible and setting fair boundaries where necessary." Diana presented Maggie and Connor's position first, detailing the medical negligence and Fiona and Trevor's subsequent attempts to shift blame. "My clients aren't seeking punitive damages beyond what the insurance settlement will cover," Diana concluded. "What they seek is acknowledgement, accountability, and assurances for the future." Trevor and Fiona's lawyer, Martin Greaves, responded with a more conciliatory tone than Connor had expected. "My clients recognize that serious mistakes were made in the management of Mrs. Reeves's surrogacy. While they relied on Dr. Nichols's professional judgment, they acknowledge that they should have been more attentive to Mrs. Reeves's concerns." Fiona shifted uncomfortably beside him. Mediator Burns noticed. "Ms. Bailey, you look like you have something to add." Fiona glanced at her lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. She began, then faltered. "This isn't easy for me." "Take your time," the mediator encouraged. Fiona looked directly at Maggie for the first time. "I've spent months trying to justify what happened, telling myself we did nothing wrong, that it was all Dr. Nichols's fault. But the truth is, I knew you were suffering. I saw it every day while you were staying with us. I wanted those babies so badly that I convinced myself your symptoms weren't serious." The admission hung in the air, unexpected and raw. "Why did you try to blame me afterward?" Maggie asked quietly. "When I was unconscious, fighting for my life." Fiona's hands twisted in her lap. "Panic, fear, and if I'm being completely honest, shame. It was easier to paint you as irrational than to admit I had prioritized my desires over your life." "And the newspaper articles? The volunteer taking photos at the NICU?" "Indefensible," Fiona admitted. "By then, I was desperate to control the situation, to protect our reputation and deflect blame. It was wrong. All of it was wrong." Connor watched Maggie absorb these words, saw her straighten slightly in her chair. It wasn't forgiveness he read in her posture, but something equally powerful, vindication. The mediator turned to Trevor. "Mr. Bailey, do you share your wife's assessment?" Trevor nodded soberly. "Yes. We got caught up in our goal of having children and lost sight of the human cost. Maggie's sacrifice gave us our daughters, and we repaid her with betrayal." Diana looked at Maggie, a question in her eyes. Maggie gave a small nod before Diana spoke. "My clients appreciate these acknowledgments. Now, let's discuss what happens going forward." Over the next 2 hours, they negotiated terms. The Baileys would issue a public statement accepting responsibility for their role in Maggie's medical crisis and retracting their previous allegations. They would contribute to a foundation supporting ethical surrogacy practices and improve care for surrogates experiencing complications. Most significantly, they agreed that any future relationship between Maggie and the twins would be entirely at Maggie's discretion, with no pressure or obligation. "There's one more matter," Diana added toward the end of the session. "The emotional distress caused by the Baileys' actions after Maggie's hospitalization. While the medical expenses are covered by insurance, the defamation campaign caused significant additional trauma." Martin Greaves leaned over to consult with his clients. Trevor whispered something to Fiona, who nodded reluctantly. "My clients propose a structured settlement to compensate for emotional distress," Greaves announced. "Additionally, they're prepared to cover the costs of therapeutic support for both Mr. and Mrs. Reeves for as long as needed." The financial offer was generous, more so than Connor had expected. He glanced at Maggie, who seemed surprised as well. "We accept," Diana said after confirming Maggie's agreement. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up by tomorrow." As the meeting concluded, Fiona approached Maggie hesitantly. May I speak with you privately for a moment? Connor started to object, but Maggie touched his arm. It's all right. The others stepped out, leaving the sisters alone in the conference room. Connor waited in the hallway, watching through the glass door as Fiona spoke, her hands gesturing emphatically. Maggie listened, her expression guarded but attentive. After a few minutes, Fiona reached into her purse and handed Maggie what appeared to be photographs. Maggie accepted them without examining them. When Maggie emerged, her eyes were dry, but her voice was thick with emotion. Let's go home. In the car, Maggie finally looked at the photos Fiona had given her. They showed the twins, now 3 months old, developing the unique features that would distinguish them as they grew. She asked if someday I might want to be part of their lives. Maggie told Connor. Not as their surrogate, but as their aunt. What did you tell her? Maggie slipped the photos into her purse. That I don't know what the future holds, but that right now, I need to focus on my own healing. Connor reached across to take her hand. That seems fair. Maggie squeezed his fingers. She also said something else. She said she's been in therapy since the twins were born, trying to understand why she was willing to risk my life. Why she's always been so driven to get what she wants, regardless of the cost to others. Has she found any answers? Some, Maggie replied. Enough to recognize that her behavior wasn't normal sibling rivalry or selfishness. There's something deeper there. She's been diagnosed with narcissistic tendencies that therapy might help with. Connor wasn't sure what to make of this information. On one hand, it offered a framework for understanding Fiona's extreme behavior. On the other, it seemed too neat an explanation for years of manipulation and the ultimate betrayal. Does that change how you feel? He asked carefully. Maggie considered the question. It helps me understand, but it doesn't erase what happened. I don't hate Fiona anymore, but I also don't trust her. Perhaps someday that will change, but for now, I need distance. When they arrived home, Maggie moved slowly up the walkway, leaning on her cane. Connor watched her, struck by the contrast between her physical fragility and her emotional strength. In the midst of recovery, facing an uncertain medical future, she had found the clarity to set boundaries without bitterness, to seek justice without vengeance. That evening, as they sat on the patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maggie turned to Connor with unexpected tears in her eyes. I never properly thank you, she said softly, for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself, for seeing the danger when I was blinded by Fiona's manipulation. Connor lifted her hand to his lips. You would have done the same for me. Yes, Maggie agreed, but I should have listened to you sooner. When you first raised concerns about Dr. Nichols, about the risks, I dismissed you so completely. You wanted to help your sister, Connor said simply. You believed the best of people, even when evidence suggested otherwise. It's one of the things I've always loved about you. Maggie shook her head. Not anymore. I've learned that trust should be earned, not automatically given. That skepticism isn't always cynicism. Sometimes it's wisdom. As darkness fell around them, Connor reflected on their journey. How a decision made with good intentions had nearly cost them everything. How they had fought their way back from the brink, not just of death but of betrayal. There was still healing to be done, physically and emotionally. But tonight, sitting beside Maggie as she watched the first stars appear, Connor felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 1 year after the emergency that had nearly claimed Maggie's life, Connor stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching as she prepared for the day. Morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating her as she fastened a delicate necklace around her throat, a gift from Connor to mark the anniversary, not of the trauma, but of her survival. Maggie caught his reflection in the mirror and smiled. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to remember how lucky I am, Connor replied, crossing the room to kiss her cheek. At 40, Maggie had regained most of her strength, though her recovery had been neither swift nor simple. 6 months of dialysis had eventually transitioned to monthly monitoring as her kidney function stabilized. The physical therapy had been grueling, but she had approached it with the same determination she brought to everything. Now, she moved with only the slightest hesitation, a barely perceptible reminder of what she had endured. The car service will be here in 30 minutes, Connor reminded her. Are you sure you're ready for this? Today marked a significant milestone. Maggie's first visit to the Westfield Museum since completing the restoration project remotely. More importantly, it was her first professional appearance since the surrogacy crisis had thrust her into unwanted public attention. As ready as I'll ever be, Maggie replied, smoothing the front of her emerald dress, a color chosen deliberately to complement her eyes and signal vitality. Dr. Rodriguez cleared me for regular activities months ago. I know, Connor acknowledged. I just want to make sure you're not pushing yourself too hard. Maggie's expression softened. You're still worrying about me. Force of habit, Connor admitted. One I'm not likely to break. She crossed him, resting her hands on his chest. I'm okay, Connor. Better than okay. Today feels like reclaiming something I lost. The journey to this point had been neither straight nor easy. The settlement with the Baileys had been finalized, including their public statement taking responsibility for their role in Maggie's medical crisis. Dr. Nichols had moved to another state after her suspension, attempting to rebuild her career far from the scandal that had defined her. Fiona and Trevor had maintained respectful distance, sending occasional updates about the twins, but never pressuring Maggie for involvement. 3 months ago, Maggie had surprised Connor by suggesting they send a gift for the girl's first birthday. Nothing elaborate, just 2 beautifully illustrated children's books with simple inscriptions. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of something new. The museum reception was elegant but understated. As a consultant on the renovation, Maggie wasn't the center of attention, which suited her perfectly. Still, Connor noticed how colleagues sought her out, expressing genuine pleasure at her return to professional life. Midway through the evening, Connor found himself speaking with the museum director while Maggie conversed with the head conservator across the room. Your wife's contributions were invaluable, the director told him. Her expertise in medieval pigments solved problems that had stymied our team for months. And she accomplished it all while recovering from serious health issues. She's remarkable, Connor agreed, watching as Maggie gestured animatedly, explaining some technical aspect of the restoration. The passion in her face, the confidence in her posture. These were the qualities he had feared might be permanently diminished by her ordeal. We'd like to offer her a permanent position, the director continued. Part-time at first, if that would accommodate her health needs, but with the potential for full-time work when she's ready. Connor wasn't surprised by the offer. Maggie's talents had always spoken for themselves. What did surprise him was the absence of concern at the prospect of her returning to work. 6 months ago, even 3 months ago, he would have worried about the stress, the physical demands. Now, seeing her in her element, he felt only pride. On the drive home, Maggie leaned against him, tired but satisfied. The director offered me a position, she told him. I said I'd think about it. Any initial thoughts? Connor asked, careful to keep his tone neutral. Maggie considered the question. I'm tempted. The work is fascinating, and the part-time schedule would be manageable. But, our plans, Maggie said softly. The ones we put on hold. The sabbatical, traveling to Italy, starting a family of our own. The mention of family caught Connor off guard. They hadn't discussed children since before the surrogacy, and given Maggie's hysterectomy, he had assumed that particular dream had been set aside. I've been researching adoption, Maggie continued, watching his expression carefully. There's so many children who need homes. It wouldn't be the same as having our own biological child, but it would be our family. Connor finished for her, a wave of emotion making his voice rough. Our child in every way that matters. Maggie's smile was radiant. You're not upset that I've been thinking about this? Why would I be upset? Maggie, I thought you might not want to consider parenthood after everything you've been through. For a while, I didn't, she admitted. The trauma, the loss, it was overwhelming. But lately, I've started to imagine a different future, one that honors what happened without being defined by it. Connor pulled her closer. Whatever you decide about the job, about adoption, I'm with you. But don't feel pressure to make decisions tonight. We have time. Time, the gift they had almost lost. Connor thought about how close he had come to losing Maggie, how the simple pleasure of planning a future together had nearly been stolen from them. Now, Hearing her speak of possibilities rather than limitations, he felt the last weight of fear lift from his shoulders. The following Sunday, Maggie surprised Connor by suggesting they visit the park near their home, a place they had once frequented but had avoided since her illness. It was a beautiful autumn day, reminiscent of the 1 year earlier when they had sat on their patio after the mediation, watching the sunset as Maggie began to reclaim her narrative. They walked slowly along the path bordering the lake, Maggie occasionally pausing to rest, but refusing the wheelchair Connor had brought just in case. Children played on the nearby playground, their laughter carrying across the water. "I received a letter from Fiona yesterday," Maggie said as they sat on a bench overlooking the water. "She's continuing with therapy, apparently making progress." Connor nodded, unsurprised that Fiona had reached out near the anniversary. "How do you feel about that?" Maggie considered the question, cautiously optimistic. She included some photos of the girls. They're walking now, developing distinct personalities. Alexandra is apparently the daring one, while Victoria is more thoughtful. "Do you want to see them?" Connor asked gently. Despite the occasional updates and the birthday gifts, Maggie had maintained her distance from the twins. "I think I might," Maggie said slowly. "Not right away, but perhaps for Christmas. A brief visit on our terms." Connor squeezed her hand, recognizing the significance of this potential step. Maggie had insisted throughout her recovery that she wouldn't allow guilt or obligation to dictate her relationship with her nieces. Any connection would be built on her terms when she was ready. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you," he assured her. "But don't feel pressure to move faster than you're comfortable with." Maggie turned to face him fully, her expression earnest. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about today. This past year, I've been so focused on what I lost, my health, my trust in Fiona, our original plans for a family. But sitting here, I'm reminded of everything I still have, everything we have together." Connor brushed a strand of hair from her face, noticing how the autumn sunlight brought out the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Which is a future," Maggie said simply. "Different from what we imagined, perhaps, but ours to shape. I don't want fear or resentment to determine our choices anymore." A family of ducks paddled across the lake, the parents flanking their offspring protectively. Maggie watched them, a wistful smile playing at her lips. "I called the adoption agency yesterday," she revealed. "We have an initial consultation next week, if you're still interested." Connor felt his heart expand with hope and possibility. "I am," he confirmed, his voice husky with emotion. "It won't be easy," Maggie cautioned. "The process is lengthy, there are no guarantees, and my medical history might complicate things." "When has easy ever been our path?" Connor asked with a gentle smile. "We've faced worse challenges and emerged stronger." Maggie leaned against him, her weight solid and real. "I've been thinking about what to tell our potential child someday, about the surrogacy, about Fiona and the twins. It's complicated, but I think honesty is important." "We'll find the right words when the time comes," Connor assured her. "Together, as we've done with everything else." As they walked back toward the park entrance, Maggie paused, turning to face the setting sun. "Do you know what I realized recently? Throughout this ordeal, you never once said I told you so. Not when I ignored your concerns about Dr. Nichols, not when Fiona betrayed me, not even when my health collapsed exactly as you had feared it might." Connor shook his head. "That was never what mattered to me. I just wanted you safe, not vindicated in my concerns." "I know," Maggie said softly. "And that's why, when I decided to say not my choice, not my emergency to Fiona's manipulation, I knew I was making the right decision. Because you had shown me what real love looks like. Not controlling or coercive, but supportive even when it's difficult." Connor drew her into his arms, there in the golden light of autumn. A year ago, standing in an empty house while Maggie lay in a hospital bed, he had wondered if they would ever reclaim the life they had planned. Now he understood that some plans were meant to change, that sometimes the path forward led through unexpected territory toward a destination more meaningful than the original. "Ready to go home?" he asked as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Maggie nodded, slipping her hand into his. "Home," she agreed, "to start our new beginning." As they walked together toward the car, Connor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had weathered betrayal, faced mortality, and emerged with a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. The road ahead still held challenges. Maggie's ongoing health management, the uncertain path of adoption, the complicated family dynamics with Fiona and the twins. But today, watching Maggie move with growing confidence beside him, her face turned toward the future rather than the past, Connor felt a profound certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together, stronger for having survived the storm. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.